Welcome to another edition of Point Counterpoint. This is Robert.
And I'm Sujay.
Jay.
Okay, this is brought to you by Orbis.net, again, a social media site that does not censor. Tonight's episode is systemic racism a real thing? So who wants to go first?
I think I could start off by defining what systemic racism is academically. So essentially,
Yes,
what the academic definition of systemic racism is essentially laws and regulations that essentially result in disproportionate outcomes for people of color or other historically marginalized groups, and essentially just prevent their socioeconomic rise. So it's essentially systems that are created through laws, for instance, like educational systems, healthcare systems, that even though it might not be explicitly racist, some way or another, the outcome results in a disproportionate effect that harms the socioeconomic status of people of color. So I guess one of the places that you can frequently see systemic racism in is in the education system. So for instance, the education system is not designed in a way that is like explicitly racist, in that, right, there isn't some guy that is explicitly trying to say that, like, at least today, right, in modern America, there isn't, one person who is explicitly saying that, like, one certain race should receive better education than another race. But the thing is that the way that our education system is set up, right, it's funded entirely through, or mainly through municipal property taxes, right? So the thing is that obviously richer communities are gonna be able to provide more funding through property taxes, because they're gonna have higher property taxes to their schools, right? Meaning that kids in richer schools are gonna be funded better than kids in poorer schools. So but the issue with that also is that because Black people and other people of color were they were prevented from building up intergenerational wealth through years of slavery and discrimination. They live in poorer socioeconomic conditions, meaning that historically they've had worse funded schools because, right, they have lower property taxes. So it's essentially, right, for instance, an example of systemic racism in education would be the school funding itself, right, is not explicitly racist, but the way that it's set up, right, it results in disproportionate outcomes, right? So it's an implicit racism in that sense. And right,
well, here's the problem that I have. First of all, to me, a lack of racism is equal opportunities. When you say equal outcomes, I mean, that's, sorry, communism to me.
Well, the thing is that
should be entitled equal opportunities.
But the thing is that we don't have equal opportunities.
Equal outcomes, you can't enforce.
The thing is that we don't have equal opportunity, right? The lack of equal opportunity is causing unequal outcome. So for instance, right, in education funding, right, just going back to this example, because I think it's the most appropriate, right? Lack of education funding in poorer districts and historically Black districts, because of lower property taxes in that area, because of lower property values, creates, right, unequal opportunity. If people can't get, right, equal opportunity and access to education, and if they can't get a high level of education, right, or a high quality education, they're obviously going to be
disproportionate
outcomes. Right. So it's that, like, the thing that I'm saying.
Well, then why are the Democrats against?
I mean, reduced lack of equal opportunity results in disproportionate outcomes.
Well, then why are the Democrats against school choice? School choice was a big factor in the Virginia. I mean, the Virginia race.
But the thing is that yes, but again, once again, school choice, it doesn't address the issue of that. But it doesn't address the issue of schools still being funded through property taxes. I mean, once again, because the thing is, like, the government is not giving the government is not giving each student, right, the exact same amount of money and exact same amount of funding, right? It's still going through the property taxes, right? So the property taxes of a community is being divvied up to students, right? So once again, like, poor municipalities are still going to be divvying up less money to each student than richer municipalities, meaning that once again, right, the issue of funding is still there even with school choice.
I mean, when you speak of funding, the educational budget, especially in Maryland, has went up every freaking year. I mean, it is so well funded.
I mean, but it's
Yet
not. I mean, you have
it's not.
I mean,
I'm gonna pull up.
I mean, but once, for instance, I mean, like, for instance, Newark, right? I mean, kids in Newark are getting far less funding than kids in Montgomery and kids in Hillsborough. So, like, that's just an example in New Jersey, for instance. I mean, like, even when you look in New York, right, the amount of funding for like historically Black areas of New York is significantly less than the funding for wider areas of New York. So, like, it's like, obviously, I'm sure you can pull up, one or two examples of like, this being off. But when you look at it from like a nationwide perspective, yes, I mean, poorer districts have less funding than richer districts, and poorer districts tend to be disproportionately Black or people of color.
Well, they should I mean, again, you want things to be better. Number one, competition. Number two, what states are doing. A lot of states are allowing the educational money to follow the kid as opposed to the district.
Yeah, but once again,
you're cutting me off.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. There's all these things that actually try to provide some competition in the school system, but you have basically a monopoly, and then you wonder why it's not doing well. I mean, I don't think there's any amount of money you can put in education. If they're doing things like lowering standards for kids, they're dropping some of the special programs. They're not letting kids sit there, and if they don't like the school, they have nowhere else to go. They can't go to a different school district. School choice, what is it? 70% of the public supports school choice, yet the Democrats block it.
I mean, but the thing is that once again, school choice, it doesn't let you go to any district school you want to, right? You're still funded by the municipality, right? So the money that you have, right, it's not like you're still funded by the municipality. The municipality is still divvying up funding per student, right? So for instance, right, if Newark was supposed to institute school choice, right? A student in Newark, right, that they would still receive less funding than a student in like a richer county, right? Because once again, the funding is still coming from property taxes, so it doesn't address the issue of disproportionate funding. Additionally,
but that's not completely true. There's a lot of state funding.
I mean, is there a state
federal funding?
Okay, but still, I mean, even with federal funding, I mean, like, even with federal funding and with state funding, and this has been historically shown through like various studies, almost every single study that looks at this issue will find that poorer districts receive less funding per student, just because, right, they have less property taxes. And even though there's federal funding, right, most school funding still comes from property taxes. It's not like how it is in the UK, where like all funding from schools is divvied up equally by the central government. We don't have that in the United States. It's the most funding comes from the property taxes themselves, which are dependent upon, right, the property values, which are implicitly racist, because people like the districts where a lot of people of color live have lower property values, meaning that they're going to have lower property taxes compared to richer areas.
Property values are racist?
I mean, yeah, because once again, lower property values equals less property taxes, which leads to less school funding.
That doesn't make sense, bro.
What do you mean? I just explained it. Lower property taxes means that you have less. Lower property values means that you have less property taxes, meaning that you have less school funding. Even though it's not explicitly racist, it leads to a racist system because it leads to a disproportionate school funding.
So where does this end?
I mean, it doesn't.
Communism. That's where
having equal school funding is communism. That's equality. That's equal school funding.
You're distorting our.
Yeah, you don't. Here's the thing. But when you mention this stuff, you don't talk about equal opportunities. You talk about equal outcomes. That's freaking communism.
I literally, when you're talking about school funding, I'm talking about unequal opportunity. I mean,
and when you think property values are racist, property values are basic economics, dude.
Okay,
you can't call that racist.
I said this in the beginning, right? You don't have to be explicitly racist in order for something to be racist, right? Okay. Things can be implicitly racist, right?
It's not race. It's basic. Okay. Do you have a mortgage?
No, I don't have a mortgage.
Do you have a mortgage?
No, I don't have a mortgage. Like,
Okay.
I'm 19.
But when you're sitting there and you're like raising a family, you have a house and you're trying to sit there and provide for your kids, and you say this shit and that shit's racist when you're having a hard time providing for people, that's creating racism.
What?
I know a whole no. I know a whole bunch of people that work like their ass off. Okay, me. I grew up in Baltimore City in a row home. My father was a meat cutter. My mom was a cashier. And we actually only had a little bit of money because my mom died and I got life insurance. I mean, my father got life insurance. But you know what? I mean, I paid rent at home. I bought all my cars. I put my way through college. I've been working 2 jobs for a while now. Where is my white privilege? There's no racism in this. I worked and bought what I got. Anybody can do that. All the people.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you know, all these people that work their butt off, you're saying, well, you're going to sit there and you judge them based on the color of their skin. You're going to create racism. You're going to create a lot of outrage because all these people are trying to feed their families. You want things to be this kind of line, this kind of push is going to create tribalism. And then you're going to make more racism. If you want to stop racism, you judge people by the content of their character. Like King said, we're doing the opposite. We're pushing segregation now. And like, here, I'm going to give you a few examples. All right. Where did it go? Here it is. Field trips are only for people of color. That was what school system? Well, I don't know where Jefferson Middle is, so I guess it doesn't matter. Minnesota, minority teachers going to get higher pay. New York State, minorities will get antibodies, the monoclonal antibodies more. Washington State prioritizes minority patients for COVID treatment. I mean, you don't fight racism with racism, and that's what you're doing here.
I mean, how is saying that there's disproportionate school funding racist? I mean, I'm just saying that this results in a racist system. I mean, I don't understand how what you just said was like how that relates to systemic racism. What I'm saying is that
because when you're pushing race and judging race with it,
it's not judging race. I mean, I'm saying
it is.
If you don't judge the fact that Black students on average get less school funding than other people of other races, right? Then you can never solve that issue. Right? So it's like you have to identify some things, or else you're never going to solve that issue.
No, I understand that, but there's ways to do it without screwing over white people. I'm okay with actually making it equal.
Yes, but
I would be fine.
So that does not have to screw over white people in order to make it equal. I mean, what you would do?
Well, here's the thing.
You stop divvying up school funding at the municipal level, and you send it to the federal government, and then you create like a set amount for each student to get, and then that's how every single.
I would be fine with that.
Exactly. So
I would agree with
that is what Democrats have proposed, right? At least progressive Democrats have proposed, and I mean that is not a racist system. That's a way to tackle systemic racism without impacting, with making like a completely equal system. I mean, if you want colorblind, right? That's how you get to colorblind. Give everybody an equal amount.
That I would be fine with, but the problem is I would be willing to bet if you tried other things, like some actual competition of education, the Democrats would block it. Because again, it's all about money. And
I mean, the thing is that school choice, it doesn't result in competition either. Because I mean, charter schools are still government institutions, right? They're run through taxpayer money. So the thing is, right, you're essentially having competition. I mean, but the thing, even with private schools, I mean, like you're essentially saying that like the thing is, private schools, like they're already out competing like regular schools. And the thing is, like how would the private schools can't take every single student, right? So the thing is, like, you're gonna have some students who get into private school, and then with school funding or school choice, sorry, you're gonna have some students who manage to get into private school, and then what happens to everybody else who can't get into that private school? I mean, unless you privatize the entire education system.
Well, as a capitalist, I actually like competition. And I think no matter like I'm very, very pro space travel, and I can't stand NASA. Why? Because there's no competition. I'm just as an aside, I think whenever there's a lack of competition, there's a lack of accountability, there's a lack of making sure that all, that you're using tax dollars wisely. I mean, if I can't get fired, I'm not going to work too hard. It's basically what I'm getting at.
I mean, but even like, for instance, if we look at like an entirely privatized education system, like for instance, universities, higher education systems, that's entirely competitive industry. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of universities in this country, and I mean, if you look at there, like money is not being spent wisely at universities. There's fraud amongst administration officials. There's tuition fraud. I mean, there's so much things that are going on in the seemingly competitive industry of university. So I don't understand how doing the same thing to like K through 12 education would result in more efficient outcomes. And we've seen that it doesn't result in more efficient outcomes in higher education.
Fraud is part of human nature. I mean, if you're going to get rid of,
but it's not even
you can't
fraud.
get rid of fraud without getting rid of people. However,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, no matter what system you have, there's going to be people that take advantage of it. What you're trying to do is provide the system with the most opportunities, as far as I see it. Like your idea with funding all of them equally, I'm okay with that. A lot of states probably want to be thrilled, but I'm okay with that. I mean, to me, I don't care about equal outcomes. I care about equal opportunities.
So I mean, that's exactly what. The thing that I mean, I think what the right wing takes out of context is that what the left wing is essentially saying is that disproportionate outcomes come from a lack of equal opportunity, and for some reason the right has taken that and said
there's
that
always going to be disproportionate outcomes in any system.
But we're saying
you
that
can't
right
make
now,
it equal.
but we're saying right now, right? I mean, like the extent of we have completely disproportionate outcomes.
Let me give you an example.
The reason why our outcomes are so disproportionate is because of the size of inequality and opportunity that we have.
When they mention that women get paid less than men, they're trying to make it some sexist argument, and it's not. They don't look at all these factors, like some women decide not to work part-time because they're going to be a mother. Women pick different careers than men. They might not work the same hours. They don't work 8 hours a week like a man does. There's all these factors that can build in. Like, my friends that are engineers make more than me in healthcare because I picked healthcare. There's going to be some, but if it's all across the board, then I would agree something needs to be done. And actually, as long as you're not hindering somebody else because of their race, I'm fine with what you mentioned about all states having the same funding. Okay, I would do that.
I mean,
but calling property tax racist is a different thing entirely.
No, I mean, what I said before. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, CJ. You haven't talked at all.
Yeah, so as someone who's trying to come there, and someone who's an international student, like, tell me one thing. I don't get this thing. Okay, so when I look up the tuition fee for students, it says for local residents, if a credit hour is say like $500, for an international student, the credit hour is $1,300. So that is something that I just can't understand. Why is there such a disproportionate disparity?
Well, a lot of things is that, like, for instance, some colleges, right? A lot of times they want to attract local students, right? So then they raise the prices on international students.
I agree.
Yeah.
Like even in Europe that does happen, but not at such big a number is what I'm saying.
But the thing is, I don't really think that relates to. I mean, I certainly think that's wrong. But the thing is, I'm not sure how that relates to what we were discussing. If you want to just make that more clear.
No. I'm saying, as someone who's not experienced what you guys have experienced, because I'm not in that country, I can only talk about the kind of racism that I think is racism. Yeah. So that's. But I'm not saying that is wrong or anything. I'm just saying it's just a disproportionate number.
Yeah, I think. For instance, I guess you could call that also a place of disproportionate opportunity as well.
No, but then what I'm doing, see, it's not like people out here are throwing up a stroke, right? Saying that this is that we need this. Just getting on with lives, man. Just go ahead, do what's there in front of you, and just see. Life is not easy. So there are some things that you will get. There are some things that are difficult to get. It's just about how you prioritize things, and you just make use of what's in front of you. Because if you keep crying about everything, if you keep saying that this is not good, this is not good, we are never going to be happy. That is one thing I think that Americans or Americans who are my age, in that say from 20 to 30, the two involved in these kind of petty things, if you ask me. Because see, no matter what you do, things are not going to change upstairs. You know that. No matter how many demonstrations you go to, no matter what you do, because at the end of the day, we are just a number. We're just a number to the government. It's all about, there are lots of examples where black people, but people of color, black people, brown, blue, whatever, they have made it. Like they haven't tried to.
In Carson, Baltimore.
Okay, but once again, you can't use singular instances in order to describe an entire, like, just because one person made it out doesn't mean that everybody's going to make it out. I mean, look, the thing is that, right, like, I mean,
Dude,
if we don't, I know there's a lot, but you can't use that. I mean, if you look at nationally, you see that there's a big discrepancy, right? Like you can't take these singular instances and then like elevate them to represent entire systems, right? I mean, so like it's that, like, if we just get on with it, right? The thing is, it's never going to be solved, right? Like we're never going to solve educational funding if we just get on with it, right? So that's the thing. Like we sometimes
okay,
have
but
to
here's what do you propose it? How is this going to change? Because nothing has changed for the last 100 years. How is this going to change?
Well,
now?
here's the thing.
That's the thing. That's the thing. I think, right. I mean, that goes back to the idea that we had before that America's not a democracy since our politicians don't listen to us. But like once again, like.
Well, we're not a democracy, or we're a republic, but okay.
It essentially means the same thing, though. Like a republic is a type of democracy.
I get this feeling that every time I ask for a solution, you tend to go more on the socialist and communist lines, man.
Yeah, because I'm a socialist.
Okay, well, here's the thing. You mentioned education and outcomes. The one thing most conservatives believe that the issue with outcomes, in other words, poverty, crime, the whole shebang, the liberals never even discussed as an option. To me, it's simple. If you look at the city, you look at crime, you look at, especially the African-American community, you see ties between welfare programs and the destruction of the nuclear family. And a billion studies have basically said the nuclear family is the best environment possible for kids. 77%, I think, of African-American kids are born in single families. This is what hurts them. This is what provides them with a lot of opportunities. That basically you're subsidizing the destruction of the nuclear family for African-Americans. That's who it's hurting. That's why there's more crime. That's why there's less education. I mean, there's been a billion study that shows a kid brought in a nuclear family is less likely to be involved in crime, is more likely to have a better education. Every outcome is better. And there's no surprise that basically once the Great Society started, the nuclear family went to hell and you had social consequences. That's exactly what I think. You want things to be better, number one, you need to start with the family and the family structure.
I think if we want to stop, subsidizing the destruction of nuclear families, then it's very simple. We just have to increase the welfare payments to married couples. I mean, the reason why people don't marry right now, and the reason why there's a lot of single mothers, is because, for instance, like the amount of welfare that you get as a married couple, right? It doesn't subsidize both people, right? So, like for instance, as I said, I think one of these podcasts before, right? Once you get married, right, you get like each person gets around 75% rather than 100% of one person's welfare, 100% of another person's welfare. So like the simple way to do it is simply increase the welfare payments to married couples so that you encourage people to get married. If you really think like nuclear families is something that needs to be encouraged, just increase welfare payments to married couples. That way people get married, right? And once but the thing is, Republicans have routinely been against, increasing welfare payments. I mean, it's one of the fundamental
because if you whenever you subsidize something, you get more of it. The nuclear marriage is dying because of the divorce laws in this country. Talk to men. I mean, there's a number of reasons why men aren't getting married. A lot of it has to do with no-fault divorces going by the wayside. Like women basically, if a guy gets divorced, the woman's going to get the kids. Half of his income is gone. A woman basically gets rewarded to break the contract. men don't see marriage as a positive for them anymore. The laws of this country have destroyed marriage. I mean, that's what me and a lot of guys think.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I don't understand how that like relates to systemic racism, though. But like,
No, but it's not racism. It just affects marriage.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess, I mean, if we could change, we could do another discussion about marriage laws. But the thing is, like, it's systemically, right? If you think that like the root cause of like disproportionate opportunity or disproportionate outcome is,
don't cut them off.
If you think that the root cause of disproportionate opportunity is the destruction of the nuclear family, right? Then like the simple way to do it is what is causing the destruction of the nuclear family is lower welfare payments to married couples, right? You just solve that by,
well, I don't agree with that, but okay.
Increasing welfare payments to married couples. Then you subsidize marriage. Like, I don't understand. Like, it's
I mean, but your basic premise, I think I agree with. Make it more economically positive to be married is what you're saying.
I mean, yeah,
in principle, I agree with that statement. So it's
nice
to agree on.
The way you do it is through welfare payments.
I don't.
So.
No, I mean, actually, Sujay, I want to pick on India for 1 minute. And I really know nothing about India. Just tell me about the caste system and that going by the wayside and how, I know nothing about India.
So the thing is, Rob, there's something called the Brahminical caste in India, as in that's from the Hindu perspective. They are the ones who run the temples, and they're the ones who do the rituals and everything. So they are regarded as the top caste. So what happens is not so much in the cities, but in the rural areas and in towns and everything. That sort of discrimination is still very rampant, and the people, they just take it because it's part of the culture. Like like if you come to the cities, you will in cities it's not that bad because people are smart here. But then there, for example, if there's say a person from the lower caste just walks on the field of a higher caste guy, he has to hold his slippers, and he has to take a broomstick and just wipe the part where his feet were. So it's that bad there. And people just take it. People just take it. They know it is bad. Okay, they know it is bad, but then they just take it because it's part of the culture, and that's not going to change no matter what you do, because just like how it's with Hinduism, it's the same with certain Muslim groups as well. And it just continues, like it's the law of the land.
It reminds me of feudalism in a way. It's interesting, you basically had to have a big black death to destroy feudalism.
The thing is that, like,
and also
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go on.
Oh, sorry,
that was Jay.
Like I was just saying, like I personally, like I do see that, like, people fighting against the caste system has kind of like we see, like, for instance, in cities the caste system no longer applies. Even in like many like villages and villages, right? Like you see that like caste system, right? It doesn't really like apply anymore. It certainly does in a lot of rural areas, right? But like,
no, it does.
For instance, like,
actually.
I know, yeah. So yeah, that's something. Even though like you see that we saw in India, there is a significant reduction in the caste system because people went to cities and then they no longer follow the system.
In the cities,
and they no longer
still
follow.
prevalent.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, we see like there was a reduction in the caste system because people fought it, right? So the thing is, like, fighting it, right, it does make a difference, right? Which is why we need to fight these systems which result in disproportionate opportunity.
Right. But then again, if you look at cultures from the West. I'm not saying all the cultures are good, but then at least there, no matter like for example, like people cry, it's racist, it's this and that. Just they don't know what's happening in this part of the world. Like if those people, like if you guys come here and if you see what's going on here, you'll be like, dude, let's get to America. America is the best country in the world. So it's all about perspective, man. See what's happening around you. Like you guys have a lot that a lot of us don't have. Like for example, dude, like I know this is going away from the top, the talk, but then from the subject of the talk, but then you guys say, oh no, what, let's ban meat and everything. Try saying that to someone who hasn't had food for 3 days, man, in the Middle East or
I agree,
some
yeah.
part of India. Exactly. That's just morally wrong for you guys to go and lecture someone saying that, oh, cut this, cut that, is emissions. No, when you're hungry for 3 days, when you've gone without food for 3 days, you don't give two shits about carbon emissions, man. Come on.
What you're saying is basically you don't care about first world problems when you have third world problems.
Exactly.
That's what I always say.
Yeah.
But real quick, stupid question. How do you even tell the difference? Like with Rwanda, I couldn't tell a Hutsi from a Tutsi. How do you know which caste somebody's
it's
in?
just like family, right? Like in villages, right? Like people just know, right?
family.
Because like, oh, your parents were that, and then your grandparents were
okay.
that, right? So it's like, that's why it doesn't work in cities, because like
It doesn't work. Yeah, it doesn't work. But it's
I
very
see.
prevalent. It's very prevalent in the rural areas.
yeah.
Yes,
But
yeah.
like
the people know it's bad, but they're like, yeah, whatever.
yeah.
Oh,
So I
okay.
guess that could be.
So I think we actually came to more. No, I think we actually came to a bit more agreement than I thought we would actually.
Jay, one more thing. Jay, one more thing.
Yes.
If you actually like, dude, you were born in America, but your parents came from India, right? Their parents went from India to America. So if there is an example of someone that has overcome this institutional racism, it is your family, dude. Your family has made it. They're successful. Look at you. You're successful. So yeah, let's look at how they've done it.
Yeah, but once again,
No,
right,
I'm just saying.
Yes.
They added. I'm saying that look at the good side, right? I'm sure they must have had stacks, odds stacked against their favor, but then they still made it. So yeah, let's take the good. Let's take a positive example. That's what I'm saying.
I am fine with providing, making sure that everyone has the same opportunity as possible. I mean, as long as you're not discriminating against one to give another person opportunity. And I really don't think it's binary. I don't think you have to do that. To me, it really is, about, the content and the character. And God, when I grew up in Baltimore, I had all kinds of friends. I didn't care. There's plenty of white people I hated. You're a good person or you're a bad person. Nothing, and it was all internal. But
isn't that how it should be? Yeah.
That is how it should be. But I just don't think you make one thing better by screwing over another person. I think that's just going to make a vicious circle. And I honestly think, and maybe I'm paranoid, but I think some groups want us divided. A divided, country is a weak country.
Rob,
Go ahead.
On that exact point where you said that we all want to be peaceful and together, but then the government doesn't let that happen. So I'll give you an example from here. Okay, so there are lots of lots of videos on YouTube where people from India have gone out to Pakistan, or people from Pakistan have come over to India. Okay, and there, like the people are so friendly, like even if they know you're an Indian, the one common thing that both of them stress is people from here and from there is that we love each other. It's the governments that hate each other, and that's the reason they are dividing us against each other. That once people grasp that point, it's going to be fine.
Yeah. Well, I do think a divided populace makes a stronger government, which is not always a good thing.
The thing, I think I do think that there's people trying to divide us. I mean, I think that people have been trying to divide us. I mean, we know that people have been trying to divide us based on race since the country was made. I mean, even today, right? Yeah. We see that, like, for instance, when you look at voting districts, right? Like in Georgia, for instance, right? Black people have to wait, on average, 2 hours, whereas white, majority white, voting districts are on average in Georgia are like 30 minutes or something like that, right? So we see like there's divisions in
my voting was hours every single time I've went.
But once again, you can't take your singular experience and
there's lots of factors. Here's the thing,
nation.
No,
but Rob's white, right?
Yeah, but here's the thing. My point is there's lots of factors that can make something a long line or short line, and might have nothing to do with race. To assume it's race initially, to me, is racist in itself. There can be a billion factors. Yeah, and some of it you might be right with some of the time. But here's the thing. if you're seeing race everywhere, the problem might be you, and that's my biggest thing.
Maybe you should just change your outlook.
Let me give you an example. There was this boss I had, and I'll say she was an African American woman, and she was mean. And for a minute, like, God, does she hate white people? But then I ran into some other people that was her boss. One with the black guy, I'm like, man, I wonder if she hates guys. And then there's this girl. Does she hate girls? Then we realized, oh, she treats everyone the same badly. But I initially thought it was racism. No, it has nothing to do with racism. She's just tough on every single person who lives. So I mean, my initial, oh, that must be racist, was wrong. But everyone else thought that. Maybe it is racism, but maybe it's not. And I don't think the first thing should be, well, it must be racism. That might not be.
Yes, but once again, when we're talking about systemic racism, we're not talking about individual people, we're talking about systems. And the thing is, right, as I said in the beginning, right, a system does not have to be explicitly racist. And right, there can be implicit racism, such as through educational funding, right? As I said, right, there's not, one singular guy at the top somewhere saying, black kids will only get get $2,000 less than white kids, right? But the thing is, these policies, even though they may not have a racist intent behind them, the way that they're set up, right, it results in a racist outcome. So once again, that's implicit racism, right? So even though, right,
But
there's no
Rob,
singular
Rob.
racist person that's like controlling the system, right? These
Okay.
systems result in a racist outcome.
all right,
based on the way that
I
they're
know we're
designed.
going over 40, so let's do some last words.
Yeah. So Rob, can I say something? Yeah.
Yes.
So So the only time I've even alluded this on previous episodes, but then the only time that America is going to get rid of its racism problem is when they stop referring to people as white Americans, black Americans, brown Americans, Asian Americans. If you're American, you're an American. That's it. Fixed. It's over.
And I'm saying, if you want to end racism, you start by not talking about racism. All this stuff you said, systemic or individual, I think it's, trust me, one begets the other. And when you keep on talking, it seems like you're looking for equal outcomes. Again, to me, that's communism. You should have equal opportunities. And again, systemic, individual, it's all linked. Whenever you're talking about it, you're just going to create more of it. You want to end racism, and I think it was, I don't remember what actor said it. Stop talking about it. Judge people by the content of the character. King was right. A long time ago, King was right. That's how you end this. This is just creating more. And I don't mind if you, like you say, oh, the Baltimore County, blah, blah, we need to fix it. But do it without screwing over somebody else or making somebody else feel bad. Because right now there's a lot, it's starting to become one's beginning the other. Like the example that I just showed, minorities having their own graduation now. That's segregation. How are you okay with this? And I saw this coming.
I mean, once again, said before, when we're talking about systemic racism, we're not talking about individual instances, we're talking about systems, right? And the thing is, if you don't see, race in systems, then you're never going to be able to address the systemic racism, right? If you never see that black students are getting less money on average than white students, you're never going to be able to find a way to get black students more money in order to equate their funding to white students. That's why you have to see, race in some systems, because the races are not equal in their opportunity. But once again, I think that is why, right, we clearly have systemic racism in this country, in my opinion. And I think that I've explained it well in this podcast. But yes, I don't think that we came to an agreement here, at least, regarding systemic racism. But yep, I will end it by simply saying that I think that there's overwhelming evidence that we have racist systems in this country.
Yeah, and I just, one final
Guys have
statement.
no
I
idea
do
what
really,
racism is, bro.
I really do think we want the same things out of life, and I think we will have the same goals. It's just interesting. We have a completely different way of getting there. But thank you guys for your time. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to doing this again next week. Good night, all.
Yeah, guys.